evening. It is time to start our December 5th regular city council meeting. We will start with a roll call, please.
Councilmember Dennehy, absent. Councilmember Schmischer,
Here.
Councilmember B. Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Stein,
Here.
Councilmember Tracy,
Here.
Councilmember Worthington,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick,
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here. Next, we will have an invocation by Benny Soto and a pledge of allegiance. Please rise.
Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to do this for our city and represent the Ministerial Alliance. Bow your heads with me in a word of prayer. Father, you've created the heavens and the earth, and there is no one like you. And so we come before you knowing that we are your creation, allowed to rule the earth, but we need wisdom and discernment to do that. We need your presence to lead us and to guide us as we do that. And we ask in a real way that those who are here that represent this city, who tirelessly think about it, make the right decisions with discernment and wisdom, that they would have knowledge beyond their years, that they would be able to possess just insight into decisions that need to be made for Canyon City, for our lives, for our future. And so we ask for a spirit of protection around them in a real way, that not only you become tangible, but that you become their security. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We really appreciate having the Ministerial Alliance attend our meetings and get us set off on the right footing. I don't see any citizens' requests to speak to council, so we are going to move on to council member announcements. Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to give a shout out to the Parks Department and especially Foreman Jesse Young. Not only was the float for the City Council in the parade of lights this year absolutely fantastic. I think that the Christmas decorations and the holiday lights all over town are simply magnificent this year, and I just really appreciate the hard work and planning that went into that.
Dittos.
Yeah, dittos from all of us. A round of applause. And to Cindy and Denise and Deborah and your spouses and friends for serving so much hot chocolate and cider that we ran out. And the library as well for opening up their beautiful door and their amazing Christmas tree and Christmas for all the kids. It was really awesome. It was a huge team effort, and we really appreciate the city coming together to celebrate Christmas. Police department too. Offered security at the parade and everything else.
And many snowballs.
And snowball, yeah, subjecting yourself to snowball fighting. Highlight of the year for many children.
Perhaps the blowout for
and
Tim
me
Bell.
too.
Always next year.
Yes, Ryan. Oh, Emily.
Yeah, hi. First, I do have a quick question. I am not seeing the council view at all tonight in the meeting from Zoom, so I don't know what that means. But I do have a couple of brief things I wanted to say, if I can go ahead with that.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Just wanted to note that I did attend the Colorado Municipal League effective governance training last Thursday. It was hybrid, so you could be in person in Denver or by Zoom. It was an all-day training. It was very well done. I recommend it for those maybe who haven't taken advantage of that yet. Covered a lot of good information about council staff relations and roles and so forth, and a number of other things, legal issues too. Then the other thing I wanted to mention, the Cotter Community Advisory Group does not meet in December. Our next meeting is the third Tuesday in January. And we're meeting in hybrid meetings for that. We meet out at PCC campus in a classroom and also have Zoom available for those who are not in town. It's important to note that we've gotten to kind of a key, not late part of the CERCLA process, but a key part, and that is that in mid-November, the site owner, CLL, released a draft work plan for operable units 2 and 3, OU2 and OU3. OU2, you might remember, is the Lincoln Park area, and OU3 are some defined and undefined areas that may have been contaminated by past operations of the mill. Public comments are due on the draft plan by the end of January, so I wanted to draw folks' attention to that. That's all.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to remind everybody, we have a general government meeting here, 6 p.m. Wednesday. Excuse me. And in addition, we have Wednesday morning, KRLN.
Oh, are you taking the lead on that one?
I'll be glad to.
You would probably really appreciate to have a partner, though, I'm sure, if anyone's available.
We'll see. If not,
I'm always available on Wednesday mornings. The last few, though, have been kind of vacated once we've showed up, so.
Last month we were on.
Okay.
So hopefully you'll be good. So thank you both for being willing to take on the radio
Sure.
this Wednesday. I also had a question for council. At the mayor's summit that I went to in November, I guess, I found out that a lot of councils have a dinner hour before council meetings, and just wanted to check and see if that's something that our council would be interested. I don't think with my kids still in school and doing sports, I don't know if I could do dinner hour every meeting, but maybe once a month or once a quarter if you would like to. I think it'd be really nice. It builds a really good camaraderie and relationship building. So, thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
So, how are we looking online?
Sounds good.
So maybe we'll start with our first meeting in January. It'd be a great way to start the new year. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Council. I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to that opportunity. Any other announcements? All right, seeing none, I'm going to turn the time over to Ryan Stevens to go over our consent agenda, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Item 7A is to approve the minutes for the regular city council meeting on November 7th, the general government meeting on November 9th, and the special meetings on November 7th and November 14th. 7B extends the bid 01-21 for janitorial services to the Clean Company in an amount not to exceed $98,893.50. 7C, we're going to ask for council to move this after Ordinance 20. It is to award a bid 47-22 for the Reynolds Avenue Water Main Replacement Project to KR Swordfinger Construction in an amount not to exceed $1,478,550.70. 7D authorizes the city administrator to sign a victim service agreement with Kindred Kids Child Advocacy Center. 7E authorizes the mayor to sign a water service contract for 1420 Grand Avenue. 7F is the monthly budget summary for September 22. 7G is receive and file a list of bills for cash disbursements and from September 20th to October 19th. And 7H is to receive and file a list of bills for cash disbursements from 11/22 to 12/5.
I'm sorry, where are we moving C2?
After Ordinance 20, so that would be F.
F.
Yeah.
Councilmember Schmischer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a couple of questions on 7G, if that's all right. Sure. Thank you. That's the detail of cash disbursements. I was wondering if, no need to go through all of them this time, but I was wondering if in the future when there are funds allocated for meetings, if it would be possible to put in like what department it is or just a word or two explaining rather than just dinner and lunch meetings, if that's okay.
We can try and make that accommodation, sure.
Thank you. And then I was also just curious, Core and Main saddles.
Core and Main is the water department, so those are service saddles that go on the pipes.
So if that was the Parks Department, that would be a different concern.
I wasn't sure if it was police, parks, water. Okay. So they're watered.
Well, you could have had a cool job if you could have been on real, horse saddles. It's still a cool job. Yeah, you're right.
Thanks so much.
Any other questions for the consent agenda? Oh, that's right. We have Lori. Sorry, I have that in my notes too. Chief and Lori, would you like to address council about the agreement?
Thank you. I just wanted to come in and kind of give you an update on our 2022 numbers. It's hard to say 2022 quickly. The victim services, and this is just for the clients that we see regarding the service agreement that we're talking about tonight. We provided services to 437 clients year to date, so that doesn't include December. Of that, there were 366 cases. We attended over 200 court hearings with those victims. The majority of those cases are either going to be assault, domestic violence, harassment, and violation of protection orders. We've seen a huge increase in those lately. And the services sought through those interactions with our victims are going to be community referrals to either mental health, trying to find food resources, transportation resources are also something that we're constantly having to help our clients with as far as trying to get them to and from court. Gas prices have gone up significantly, and so a lot of our families are having trouble making all of those court dates, as many as they've had lately. In addition, finding shelter or emergency housing. We've actually had to put 5 different victims up into hotels recently because either our shelter was full or we were unable to get them into that, depending on whatever their requirements were. And let's see. Also, just emergency services at the hospital, SANE exams, accompanying them to the hospital visit. We've had 95% of our clients that came through the door received some sort of a referral, whether it was mental health or to one of our services, Department of Human Services, UCOG, one of those referral services. 15% of those took us up on helping them with victims' compensation so that they could either get help with lost wages, mental health reimbursement, or housing. 21% of the calls we received were crisis intervention, which means they came after hours, and we were either required to speak with them on the phone, or we were required to go out on scene with our victims, either at the hospital or in their home. 85% of them received criminal justice notifications from us. So my advocate has been working very hard to make sure that we are staying in contact with our victims throughout their entire process. That's why we've attended 200 court hearings in the past year. That includes motions hearings, virtual hearings, in-person hearings, trials, whatever our clients are needing, we're going to be there to make sure that they're getting that information. And then we've also helped with 15% of them get civil protection orders so that they can make sure that they're in the courtrooms getting those and filling them out appropriately so that they can be heard in court. Do you have anything?
Madam Mayor, members of council, I just wanted to, the numbers they speak for themselves, but I just want to take a moment to congratulate Lori and her staff. They continue to be a vital resource for this community and the police department. The services that they offer are absolutely essential to us helping victims regain control, become whole again. So kudos to them.
I'm here if anyone has any questions.
We do have something from Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Sure. Thank you for coming, Lori. And
Of course.
my question for you is, how many advocates do you have? What I'm interested in hearing is, it can be quite a challenge personally for an individual to have to listen to some of the things that have happened to our residents. And how many people do you have to share that burden?
So we have 3 full-time staff. We have, all of us are advocates, and when we're talking about direct services and we're taking away the child advocacy piece, all three of us provide direct services to Canyon City residents. And so I share that burden with all three of them. But one thing we've been really blessed with this year is we had a grant for self-care. And so we have been able to use that to give our staff some time away from the office without them feeling like they had to use their PTO time. We've been able to give them other things so that they can go and kind of regain some of that, reduce their stress so that they're not having to kind of take that home with them, so.
And that emotional space, you need that emotional space sometimes.
Absolutely. My staff know if they ever need to leave for any reason, all they have to do is say, hey, Lori, I'm out, and I'll handle it. I'll take it from there. And I've been lucky. I have 3 or 2 other staff members that are willing to do the same for me. So, or either that or I go find a detective to, talk to and holler at, so.
Thank you for taking care of our victims in our community, and we really, really appreciate your work that you do.
Well, thank you for trusting us to do that. Anything else? Thank you.
If there's no further questions, I would like to entertain a motion with an amendment to move item C to F2. Brandon Smith.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve the consent agenda, moving item C to F2.
Second.
There's been a motion and 2 quick seconds. Any discussion? Call vote.
Councilmember Schmischer?
Aye.
B. Smith?
Aye.
Stein?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Worthington?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
All right, we're ready to move on with our agenda. Thank you, Council. Let's go to the administrator's report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. A couple items that are not in the administrator report, some updates. The abatement at the old Holiday Hotel, that started today. They're doing asbestos abatement over there, so if you're anywhere near the 15th Street roundabout, you saw them setting up scaffolding and big trucks out there, so they will be working on that over the next several weeks. The abatement at Skyline Steel is scheduled to be complete on Wednesday, so the asbestos abatement there is wrapping up. We will be working on a bid for demolition of the buildings next, so that will be coming early next year. And then we also have abatement. Stantec, our brownfields advisor, is working on selecting a abatement contractor for the old burnt-out house at 411 North 4th Street, or sorry, 311 North 4th Street. So that will also be taken care of here in the near future. You do have my written report. Happy to take any questions. The one thing that I do want to draw attention to is that last paragraph regarding the 8-foot fences. We've done a lot of evaluation regarding 8-foot fences. We've had previous discussions around it. We've looked at different ways to slice and dice this, limit it to specific zone districts or limit it to parcels of a certain size. There really is not a clean way to do this that we've been able to find. I know Patrick has spoken with a lot of professionals in his field, both at the APA conference and reaching out to others. We're kind of at an impasse at this point. We would like to go back to enforcing our fencing regulations as previously discussed.
Well, I guess I'd have a question, Patrick. Did any of your professionals that you consulted have experience with heavy urban deer populations?
Well, certainly Front Range Communities commented on that, and the reaction I got when I described the issue here locally was, well, it sounds like that's a wildlife problem, not a fence problem. Why adjust your fence standards? The fence standards are going to have to be there, beyond whatever happens with the current situation with wildlife. And if you begin tampering with them, you're tampering with kind of one of the fundamental pieces to the look and feel of residential communities all over the city. Do you really want that for what might be a short or medium-term problem that you're dealing with.
I'm curious if council has any comments. I know that this is something that people have come to council with concerns about, and that we've kind of wanted to have a say how we move forward. Councilmember Schmischer, did you?
I mean, I hear you that it's more of a wildlife problem and that the solution should therefore be a wildlife solution, but I don't think that we've found that solution yet. So I'm concerned that if we go back to enforcing, you know, the 6-foot fence in the backyard rule without actually having figured out our way forward in our solution on the wildlife problem that is very existent in our community, that we aren't actually doing a good service to our constituents who have raised this issue and concern to us. So I wouldn't want to
Councilwoman
see
Schmisser, we have met with the wildlife department and we do have a solution going forward. And we reported that already. We're going to make hunting more accessible so that hunters coming in we can hook them up with private property owners so that we can get more positive results.
Yes, Councilwoman Stein, thank you. I do remember you reporting out on that meeting. Unfortunately, those steps haven't actually been put in place yet. So while I am very hopeful that they will lead to a very promising resolution of the wildlife problem that we are currently facing, I don't think that hasn't actually happened yet. So I think that the issue is continuing at the current day. Thank you.
Councilmember Tracy, your hand is up. Is that for this particular topic?
This and one other. Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I still struggle a little bit with this. I'm not asking for anything different to be done right now, but I would like us to continue to consider the idea of what we talked about before, and that is that the final 1 or 2 feet be something that's pretty close to transparent and be allowed. But, you know, I don't know where to go with this at this point. I don't know. Well, I'll just put it this way. I have seen, and I'm not going to say where, but I've seen backyards that have extended their 6-foot fence up higher with some wire. I don't personally find it obtrusive or offensive, so I just want to lay that out there. And then when we get to it, I do have a question about something else in the report.
Any other council members want to weigh in on this?
Yes, I think I would like to. This really is a thorny issue, and the measures that we're taking are going to be perhaps successful in the long term, and we still have the short term to deal with is essentially the issue. And it's awfully hard because we're caught between the public and the staff on this one, where the staff has definite ideas and for good and valid reasons why things should be as they are. But we also have a suffering part of the public. And I don't have a solution. No one has really come up with a silver bullet yet. But I would like to ask that if there's no other changes and this is how we're going to move forward, that you report to council every 2 weeks on any enforcement issues concerning 8-foot fences.
I would like to add that we still need to be very aggressive with the Department of Wildlife to make sure we are taking care of our urban deer population. And for me, it's almost more, my concern is more for those 150 accidents that happen. We haven't necessarily had any reports of deer attacks on people, which is the fear for some of these residents. I mean, there's attacks on our bushes and our landscaping. But, and I think another bigger issue is that where those folks who are coming to us, they never got a permit from the city. And that's a concern, that somewhere we need to do better to help people realize and understand that they need to get permits for these types of projects so they don't make an investment and then find out later that they were out of compliance. Is there a general consensus that we're okay moving forward as is then? Brandon, do you have any comments?
I just kind of echo the comments of Councilwoman Smisher. While we've had some conversations, we haven't really come to any conclusions. So, and based on the information that we were given by Department of Wildlife, tags were issued, but very, very small amounts of them were actually harvested. And it just doesn't seem like the 6 deer that were harvested off of the 11 licenses that were issued is sufficient to cutting the problem down.
So, what, Brandon, what is your guidance like?
I agree with you. I think there needs to be something done with the existing structures that were built without permits. I don't know if we need to tear them down. That's quite an investment for residents.
So, sorry. I don't necessarily want to get into any specific case, but there are
Right.
multiple issues beyond the fence height
Okay.
in that particular instance. That is the only instance that I'm aware of an 8-foot fence that
Okay.
is against code violation. We can certainly bring back, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, any enforcement issues of 8-foot fences. But if people are getting the permits, to the mayor's points, those will be denied at permit.
What are we currently halting on? Refresh my memory. All permitting?
We're not enforcing against the one instance of the 8-foot fence.
Okay.
But we would like to get that resolved because there are other issues that need to be resolved in that particular case.
And just to expand on my request a little bit, not only the enforcement side of it, but the permitting side of it. I'd like to know if we
We're
are
getting
denying.
requests.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, Emily, Tracy, do you have some more input or
I just
questions?
had a question, thank you. On page 3 of the report, Ryan, if you could say a little bit more about what's written there about the Abbey subdivision and the status on that. There's a note about staff has discussed with the applicant processing this as a minor subdivision. Applicant will discuss this with property owners. If you could just say a little bit more about if that's different than what was originally planned, and if so, what would some of those differences be?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so there's a major subdivision, and then in our new PDD regulations, there's the opportunity for a minor subdivision for a PDD. Patrick's here, correct me if I misspeak, please. A minor PDD can be, or a minor subdivision can be approved administratively, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So there is that opportunity for the applicant to go through an administrative process. If they do elect that, we would still want to have some public meetings around what they're proposing. But this is not a subdivision of individual parcels. This is a subdivision of tracts. Each of those developable tracts would still have to come back for a major subdivision, and there would still be the public process that they would have to go through for each of those tracts. I think you might.
To follow up, if I may, so if I'm understanding correctly, you don't see any real negative impact to the city's interest by handling it this way?
No, we're still going through the same review process.
Okay.
I think my only thing would be that to really emphasize the public input availability, because when we went through this with the public, we said many times, this isn't the final time you get to have your say. There's going to be many opportunities for you to come in and have a say, and we want to make sure that they have that.
And there still will be, yeah.
Okay.
This is one step, and still many steps that they still have to go through with public hearings and everything else that they would have to go through.
Okay. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Administrator Stevens. Is this essentially, though, the first and most important step in some ways, because it's determining which tract of land is going to which purpose? Or could you say a
That was
little bit-
done through the PDD, or through the zoning. So this is more about carving up those individual tracts from a mapping standpoint that were identified in the PDD zoning process. So right now, it's 187 acres, and there are no distinguishable lines, property lines. So what this would do is, for each of those zones that they created through the PDD process, it would just draw the boundaries around each of those zones.
It's a term that we call super blocking. Effectively, you're taking the internal land use area and creating one tract out of it, knowing that in the future, when it comes forward, it will have to go through the major subdivision process, which of course will trigger additional hearings before Planning Commission and Council. The big component associated with this particular layer of the project is there will be negotiations happening with the property owners over the major triggers for the public improvements that will have to be constructed, and where those triggers are tied to future development of those internal super block areas. And that's one of the things we want to make sure is very publicly and very clearly disclosed.
Thank you.
Councilmember Worthington pointed out that I may want to state what PDD is for the listening public. That's a planned development district, which is specialized zoning for a large tracts of land.
Basically, like
That
if you look at the
clarif- that
PDD for
helps.
4 Mile, how it's all sectioned out, that's.
All right, anything else for Ryan? All right, thank you, Ryan, we appreciate it. It is time to move on to item 9A1, and that's the business licensing ordinance. Ryan, are you taking that one on?
Yeah, the two items that you have before you, the business licensing ordinance and the source water protection, this is just referral to committee per the conversation we had at the council retreat several months ago. So this is referring the business licensing ordinance to the Vision Committee meeting on January 18th. And then the second item, which is the source water protection ordinance, that will be referred to committee, which is Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. And this will be the last one that where you get the ordinance the same week as the committee.
Councilmember Smisher?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could you speak a little bit about who's been invited to the meeting on Wednesday? What interested stakeholders you see as being pertinent for that conversation? And then also who you're planning to invite to the Vision Committee meeting on January 18th? Thanks.
Travis, you want to take the first one?
Sure. So far, the only organization that's been invited is RG Rio for the watershed protection. So any other suggestions, I'm more than willing to extend an invitation out.
Won't that potentially influence decision-making by the Fremont County Commissioners if the Zephyr development proceeds?
I mean, potentially, but really, nothing in this would be any more strict than what the state would put on a potential mine.
Okay,
It's not really for that.
And we really don't have a timeline on when the Zephyr would be coming to the county at this point.
Regarding the business licensing, we'll invite those who would be affected by any changes in the business licensing. And we've had, Cindy, you can correct me, I think we have something on the website right now that's letting people know, because normally these licenses would be renewed November and December for the next year. So we have a web page letting them know that it's been delayed and letting them know that there's an upcoming meeting regarding this particular topic.
And I've also been talking to them as they call in, asking about, when we could foresee things. Unfortunately, most of these licenses are not in Canyon City. They're outside of our city, so they're excited because we're taking a bunch of restrictions away from them. And so they don't have concerns because they're just excited that they're going to have less licensing really to do, especially our security guards. They're very excited that they don't have to do individual security guards if it goes through the way that we're looking at. And so we have been talking to all of them as they are trying to renew, because I keep telling them, just hold on, if this is when we're going to do it, if you would like to be a part of it. But most of them are on board with the changes because we are lessening, we're not adding anything to any of it. All of it is taking away. So.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I look forward to our discussion about the business licensing. I do have a few comments. I did look at the watershed protection ordinance, and I didn't get past the definitions. And I have major concerns with what we have written, that I do not think that what we're proposing is, number one, workable, or number two, based in science. Okay? Examples of that is if you look at the definition of municipal water supplies, it includes any water anywhere. And so if you have an individual that is undergoing medical treatment for a cancer and is receiving radionuclides, when they excrete those radioactive materials to our publicly owned treatment system, to the Sand District, they would be in violation of this ordinance. And so another thing that I would point out, what is the scientific basis for regulating dirt? And so I think there are major problems with this ordinance as written, that essentially, if this was strictly enforced, there would be no economic activity in our city, because it prohibits any discharge anywhere, anytime, essentially, through the definition pages. And so I have some major concerns about it, is what I see. But I look forward to our discussion. I would almost, recommend to council that, that if well, I think maybe the best thing to do is just bring it to the general government meeting or vision committee and talk about some of the issues there.
And we recognize this is a first pass at this. We do expect to have several committee meetings on this particular topic.
And I would recommend too, if you have additional blaring concerns, to maybe let staff know ahead of time so they can be prepared for that robust discussion that we'll be having on Wednesday.
Just be prepared to defend scientifically all of the items we wish to
Every
regulate.
item.
Well, and the one thing I would say is that with watershed protection, this is perhaps the only area where the city's extraterritorial authority is given by statute. So this isn't a home rule argument. This is language that's taken from state law that every municipality can regulate extraterritorially in this manner. So I appreciate that it may not be based in science, as you indicated, but it is based on the authority of the city to regulate its watershed extraterritorially and anything that could potentially actually impact that watershed extraterritorially.
Understand, and just so you understand, one of the things that gets me rising up out of my chair is regulations for regulation's sake.
Well, and maybe just to be prepared, I think that this conversation was sparked by lots of environmental concerns for the potential of Zephyr coming back online with gold mining, but we definitely need to look at this globally.
Correct.
Because it has to be spread to anyone and everyone that could be affected by this ordinance. All right, well, that's going to be fun.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw my hand.
Oh, please, yeah, thank you for speaking up.
Thanks. Yeah, it's difficult because Andrea and I can't see any of you, so that makes it even harder.
Oh,
Yeah,
there's something
apparently
broken,
there's
just so the public knows.
an
Sorry.
equipment problem. So Andrea and I can see each other and the seal of the city. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of follow on to what Councilmember Hamrick said. I just took a quick look at what we're going to be talking about in detail on Wednesday at General Government. But it looks to me like the impact of the ordinance is not really to city residents, it's to people upstream from us in the watershed. And so I think it would be important to, if we can, to at least let, others know, like the county, and I'm sure more than just county government, that we're going to be having this discussion. I think it's important. I mean, I understand the reason for it, that we want to protect our watershed from contamination. I mean, we have a history, as I mentioned earlier, with the Cotter uranium mill. The city's water supply wasn't contaminated, but a whole lot of private water wells were contaminated by past operations at the mill. So there's a reason we want to protect our watershed, but I'll leave it at that.
Councilmember Schmischer?
No, I was just going to say, Madam Mayor
Oh,
and
yeah.
members of council, frequently this is things like ag uses, like making sure that horses are kept away, for example, from watersheds, and grazing activity where possible. It's not, I mean, there may be bigger issues with mining and those kind of things, but this is really more of a process to assure that to the extent the city can, when it knows that it has a watershed area where it's actually getting its water, that we take measures to assure that it, to the best we can, extraterritorially, we protect it. Is it perfect? No. But knowing what development might be out there that's impacting the water that ends up in our system is in my view, the purpose of this.
And I think to that point, it is really important to invite those who are likely to be impacted by it. I understand that we'll have several meetings about it, but from the very beginning, it would be great to know that they're invited to Wednesday's meeting as well. I had pushed, but, oh, please.
I would just like to say that I did have a meeting with county commissioners about this well before we started, and they kind of gave the go-ahead, as well as there's a MOU in place for this with the county that they'd recognize a city ordinance of this nature.
I had originally pushed my button to make a motion, but if there's further conversation.
Oh, I would just say that maybe, do we need to invite ag? Do we need to invite, like, I don't know if Angela Bellatoni is still representing Zephyr, but she probably needs to know that this is on, the radar, things like, and plus she's an environmental scientist, so. Okay, yes.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we refer the business licensing ordinance to the January 18th, 2023 Vision Committee meeting and the watershed protection ordinance to the December 8th general government meeting.
I'll second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call vote.
Councilmember Schmischer?
Aye.
B. Smith?
Aye.
Stein?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Worthington?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Before I move on, quick question. If we're having camera problems, is that just a Facebook thing? Or I guess YouTube is not live though, huh?
Correct.
It's
YouTube's,
Zoom.
That's done later. Okay. Is there any other solution we can offer so that Andrea and Emily can see us, like a FaceTime call that's shared? Or
yeah,
no?
unfortunately not tonight. We've got
Okay.
a piece of equipment went bad, and we're going to have to work on replacing it.
Okay.
Is it in the budget?
Well, we do need to have another motion for December 7th, is that right?
No,
We
she
just
made,
did
her
both?
motion
Did
was for both.
Okay, sorry, my brain, I was thinking a lot of different things all at once. Excellent.
And,
Yes.
well, we voted on it. No, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good?
I think so.
Okay. Community agency funding. First and foremost, want to thank every single one of you that went through 2 days' worth of interviews. That was a really huge commitment, and I really, really appreciate the time that you took
That's
to
interesting.
do this, yeah. Ryan, do you want to kind of give us a background on what community agency funding is and how it works?
Yeah. Again, thank you for spending 2 days. It's a lot of commitment. We had 20 agencies that applied this year, and this is funding that goes from the general fund to help nonprofits in the community, to help Canyon City citizens. We received almost $90,000 in requests. There's a $50,000 budget, and certainly a lot of asks coming out of COVID. Last year there weren't nearly as many asks, so we were able to fund maybe larger amounts last year. At this time, I'll turn it over to Tammy. I know Tammy was kind of headed up the staff group on this to see if she has any additional comments.
Just one quick comment, a correction, Ryan. We're not funding a greater amount. We're funding, during COVID, we were able to fund a greater proportion of the requests, where the amount was the same year to year.
Correct, thank you.
Well, and that this $50,000 actually comes from tickets. So if you're issued municipal fines at the court, you had an option to donate that fine money to a charitable organization, and this gets into a big pot, and then it gets divvied up to our local nonprofits. Okay, Tammy.
So, as Administrator Stevens said, we did have our meeting on October 27th and 28th, where we met with 19 of the 20 applicants. The committee did make recommendations, and before you are those recommendations, I know there were a couple items that the committee wanted to bring back to council as a whole, and for that, I'll turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick to discuss those items.
Refresh my memory there, Tammy.
We had one of the agencies that was not able to make the meeting because they did not put it on their calendar. And there was concern and talk about, do we go ahead and offer them some sort of funding? But if we do that, we either need to fund them at $400, which then will use up the remainder of our allocation, or we need to reallocate everything that we have already decided.
And that was the Family Crisis Services?
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that was an oversight on their part. And so that, Tammy did correctly represent what the issue is. Because they did not, through an error on their part, self-admitted, they did not come in to talk to us. And because of that, we didn't allocate them any funds. And they did request $4,380. And refer to my manual here. And so it was there's a couple of different issues there. One of the issues is that one of the purposes of the 2 days is to hear everyone's story and everyone's request, so that we can judge between those requests as they're presented to us. And because we didn't have an opportunity to do that for the Family Crisis Services, we were not able to determine or listen to what they wanted to use the funds for. We do have what they provided to us in our packet, and so it's the I guess the first question is, do we want to see if we can accommodate their request in some way? If the answer to that is yes, do we want to, as Tammy said, just allocate the remaining $400 out of the $50,000, or do we want to go back and reallocate everything, which is kind of major brain damage. It was a difficult process to go through because there are a lot of agencies that do good things in our community, and based on those presentations, we had to weigh the pluses and minuses of each request, not only on its own merit, but in relation to the pot of money that we had. We did make choices that way, and we ended up really close to the $50,000, which we felt was a pretty fair. The I want to say, some of the agencies that weren't funded were for specific reasons. Because the community agency funding does have specific goals, some of the things were more cultural or art-related, as opposed to hard dollars helping someone in need in some way. And because of that, those were the reasons why we made some of the decisions that we did in allocating the funds. But so, I guess it's what council would like to do on this particular issue with the Family Crisis Services. Should we go back, or should we say, well, make sure you come in next year?
So I'm assuming as a committee, you already kind of decided not to give them funds? I mean, because you didn't allocate them funds.
We did not allocate them, they did not come in, so just on that basis. So it was not an evaluation of need.
So, I mean, of course, I want to hear from everybody, but first and foremost, I feel because you are the ones that spent that precious time, that I need that to respect your decision, and I'll back you up for whatever that is. And also, even if it's just $400, it seems like we've needed wiggle room every single year in the community agency funding, and so even if it's, it might be good to have that $400 for potential adjustments that need to be made. Emily Tracy?
Well, I want to echo what's already been said about really how well served our community is by nonprofits, and it really is just, it was a great experience listening to all of the folks who came before the committee and talked about the work they do and what their requests were and why they were making their requests. So just thanks again to everyone who was involved with that and came forward. It's hard to pick away and make any changes at this point, but I'll just throw out one idea. I would actually like to dedicate some funding toward Family Crisis Services. I struggled with what we decided on as a committee for the Canyon City Pregnancy Center. I just felt that there was a lot of vagueness in what they were proposing. So I would be okay with lowering theirs a little bit and, maybe using that last 400 plus some amount, 600 maybe, out of the pregnancy center allocation. But, I do hesitate to even say that because I know we could start looking at all the numbers and trying to make different decisions.
Councilmember Worthington.
I have no doubt. Oops, turned on one button, didn't turn on the other. I have no doubt that the Crisis Center is very worthy and needing money. They deserve money. But I also feel that there's a certain obligation and responsibility to these nonprofits to present to us personally. And so I'm afraid that I'm the risk of sounding pretty hard. If we give them anything, I would say the last $400, but I don't think at this point we should go back and rob from Peter to pay Paul. And that's sort of my opinion on that. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I did review the Family Crisis materials that they did provide us. And what they were asking for was for $4,380 for a crisis hotline. And one of the things that we look at when we evaluate the different proposals are what are the resources the agencies have that come before us, and how does their request compare to those resources. And what Family Crisis Services listed on their form is under the have you requested funds from other sources? If so, who, what, all those questions. But they have requested $386,000 from Crime Victim Services that begins January 1st of our fiscal year. They requested $100,000 from a domestic violence program that begins October 1st of this year, and then $20,000 and $7,500 from different other agencies or programs. And so, looking at their resources available and comparing that to some of the other resources that our other agencies have, it did seem appropriate to, perhaps not award them anything this year.
Any other input, especially from those that were on the committee?
Amy is ex officio.
I attended the meetings, but I recused myself because I have the pleasure of serving as the president of the board of the Boys and Girls Club. So I wanted to avoid any perception of conflict of interest. But seconding Councilwoman Tracy's comments that it was very heartening and very wonderful to hear all of the presentations and understand what great work folks are doing in our community. But I'll also abstain from the vote.
Okay. Well, I guess someone would need to make a motion and we'll vote on it accordingly. Before we make the motion, though, I would like to know if there's any other takeaways that you had about the needs of our community. What's the state of our nonprofits and how are we doing in taking care of our population?
Well, Madam Mayor, if I may, it's really amazing the amount of work that is done within our community by the nonprofits. And to me, it is really a truly great, if you want to call it a business model where you have nonprofit agencies addressing.
It's 7 o'clock.
Addressing needs as they can through their direct action and through personal contact. A lot of times in a government, it's a lot harder to be effective with those types of dollars and those types of programs. But when these agencies come before us, a lot of them essentially on shoestrings, where their resources are severely strained by their aspirations, and great aspirations, every one of them. It's truly heartening to see that and see the amount of work that is done by the nonprofits. It's really great.
Thank you. Councilmember Tracy.
I think it's important to note also that they are all so different from each other, not only in the type of work they do, but the type of funding they can access. I think Councilmember Hamrick mentioned about Family Crisis Services, that's an example of one of the entities that can access pretty significant grant money from certain sources. And it was important to look at, I think that's a really important question on our application, is what are your other sources of funding? The Pregnancy Center has some substantial sources of funding, and yet you look at some of the other nonprofits, they're operating on very shoestring budgets with all volunteers, with just private donations to just kind of have a minimal operation that still provides a lot of service to the community. So I think it is important to recognize that there's some vast differences from one nonprofit to another, and it's hard to know whether we should do more to kind of work that factor in the future. In other words, if someone is really able, if some group is really able to access substantial funds elsewhere, maybe they're a lesser priority in the future. It's just something to think about. Thanks.
Councilmember Worthington, did you press your button again?
I did.
Okay.
And I have my microphone on too.
Perfect.
What I was going to say is I wanted to really give a positive shout out to the volunteers that work on every one of these organizations, because as Emily indicated, a lot of these organizations don't succeed or don't exist if it wasn't for the volunteers. And I think that says a lot for our community. And I think it's something that we should all remember that, when people are down and out, that we need to continue to volunteer and also help those that need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I have a motion, and I move that we approve the community agency funding for fiscal year 2023 as presented allocating $49,600 in funds, reserving $400 for something that may pop up during the year.
I'll second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call vote.
Councilmember Schmisher,
Abstaining.
B. Smith,
Aye.
Stein,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Worthington,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Thank you, council, and thank you, staff too, Tammy as well, and Ms. Sparks was one of those as well, is that right? That participated, and just thank you for your time and work. We're moving on to item 9C. This is introduction and adoption by title only of Resolution 15, Series 2022, entitled A Resolution of the City of Canyon City, Colorado regarding pay structure.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I want to introduce Butch Batchelder as our new Human Resources Director. We're happy to have Butch on board.
Could we just take a moment for Butch to introduce himself
Sure,
to us? So
absolutely.
we get to know you a little bit?
Now, Butch Batchelder, I come to Canyon City from Pueblo. I was in the HR office over there for 3 years. Prior to that, I was actually in the HR office with Pueblo Community College. I spent 14 years there, and prior to that, I served 20 years in the military, in the Navy, again in HR. So I've got a little bit of background in it.
Well, welcome
I'm
to
very
Canyon
excited
City.
to be here.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you here. Welcome, Butch.
Thank you.
My first thought when I walked in tonight was, who's this sharp-dressed fellow right here?
Yeah.
That was the administrator.
And then you had the Canyon City pin on. I'm like, aha.
Whoops.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd also like to say that I had the opportunity and the pleasure of working with Butch in a lot of community groups and activities in Pueblo when I was working there. So I think Canyon City's been very lucky to grab him. So.
Thank you.
Going on to Resolution 15. This is to increase the salary ranges for 2023. We've had some previous discussions during both the budget hearing as well as city council retreats. This increases all of the ranges by 6.5%. Part of that is due to state minimum wage increasing by over 8% this year. And we just completed that salary study last year, and one of the things that we are trying to avoid is the compression and salary compression. And in order to combat that, part of that strategy, as it mentions as part of this compensation classification study, is to increase those ranges by that inflation. Obviously, we're not able to do the full 8% or 8+% because of budgetary constraints, but this is in line with what we've put in the budget. I'll pass it over to Butch for any additional comments.
I just think that administration and council are to be commended for this significant of a percentage increase. It is a challenging time that we're finding ourselves in with the economy the way it is right now. So, as Ryan said, it's difficult to meet the full challenge, but this is a pretty significant step in trying to get us there.
Councilmember Schmisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I understand that this will increase each of the pay brackets. Will each individual employee also be getting a 6% raise from where they're currently at? I just want to make sure I fully
Yeah,
understand.
as part of the budget, there is a 6.5% COLA also budgeted. So everybody will stay in place in their grade within the salary scales.
Thank
Yes.
you. So I understand, I think it's fantastic that we're trying to ensure that there isn't compression and that we're continuing on with what the study had recommended and that we're making sure that that moves on. And I just want to recognize the fact that this means that we're having to actually push back some of the goals of that compensation and classification study in terms of the merit increases and in terms of moving folks along. Like, this is really just the COLA increase for the year, which is which I'm glad that we're doing it, but I also just want to recognize that we're not doing everything that we had hoped to do due to the inflation.
Yeah, I appreciate that recognition. We were really hoping to get to the merit increases, but unfortunately with budget constraints and the current economy, that this is what we can do.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is not so much for this discussion, but perhaps next time, Ryan, when we're presented with a something like this, it would be really great to have another column for each category, so showing the number of FTEs that applies to.
Okay. Any further discussion? I'd like to entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve Resolution 15, Series of 2022, establishing the 2023 pay structure.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a vote.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
B. Smith?
Aye.
Stein?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Worthington?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. Appreciate you. Item D, introduction and adoption by title only of Resolution 16, Series of 2022, entitled, "A Resolution of the City Council of the City of Canyon City, Colorado, amending the adopted 2023 budget for the City of Canyon City, Colorado." Tammy.
So before you this evening, you have Resolution 16 Series of 2022. It is necessary that we amend the 2023 budget, and it is for the following changes. General fund was increased by $6,572. That's the net. Public safety increased by $42,172, which consisted of the updated lease payments, carryover items, and additional costs for upfitting the new police vehicles. When we were looking at that, of upfitting the new vehicles, the costs are coming in substantially higher than they had in the past. So we wanted to make sure that we could get some additional funding in there to make sure that our police vehicles were upfitted properly. Public Works, there was a decrease by $35,600, and that was, again, to the updating the lease figures. When we put the original budget in, we had an estimate. Now we have good numbers for our lease payments, so those were adjusted down. Water fund also was changed. It increased by $27,088. This is the net increase from postponing the filter media replacement and reallocating those funds to supplement the cost of the Reynolds water line. Also included is the carryover for a vehicle that was ordered in 2022, but it will not be received until 2023. We were anticipating that vehicle to arrive in November, and we are now anticipating, I think, it to come in at the end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter. Other than that, all of the other funds remain unchanged.
Thank you. Any questions for our finance director? Councilmember Schmisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you so much for this, Director Nordyke. It's incredibly helpful. I was wondering if you had kind of outlined what all of the changes were for, except for the general fund increase, and I'm wondering if you could just say a word or two about that.
That is the net between the $42,000 increase in public safety and then the decrease in Public Works.
Thank you.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
If there's no further questions, I'd like to entertain a motion. Councilmember Smith.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve Resolution 16, Series of 2022.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a vote.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
B. Smith?
Aye.
Stein?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Worthington?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you, council, and thank you, staff. Item E, introduction and adoption by title only of Resolution 17, Series of 2022, entitled, "A Resolution Levying General Property Taxes for the Year 2022." to help defray the costs of government for the City of Canyon City, Colorado for the 2023 budget year.
Before council tonight, you do have Resolution 17, Series of 2022, which will set our property tax mill levy for 2023. We do have to have the mill levy certified to the county by December 15th. The resolution sets the total mill levy for the city at 2.893 mills with anticipated revenue of $525,022.01. That is based on the net assessed valuation of $181,480,127. The mill levy is broke down into two parts. Our general operating mill levy is 2.887 mills, and then the refund and abatement mill levy is 0.006 mills for the total of 2.893 as our total mills.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you so much, Director Nordyke. Would you mind speaking just a little bit about how the mill levy is set?
So our mill levy is right now set at the 2.877, which is the max we can do under Tabor, because that is our mill levy under Tabor. We do go through calculations to determine if we could, well, first of all, we're in a Tabor timeout, so we can always levy our full mill levy. We do go in and calculate it anyhow to see where we would have fallen. If we were not under Tabor and if we were able to increase the mill levy, we would have actually been able to levy a higher mills, but because Tabor you can't, but but there is a calculation that we have to do, taking the assessed valuation times our mill to come up with our revenue. But there is no, we're not subject to a cap right now on our mill levy except for what was previously in place at the 2.877. I'm not quite explaining that right to you. Not that you're understanding it.
No, I think I do understand it. So we're essentially calculating it so that we're getting roughly the same, roughly the same in revenue as we did last year?
No.
Okay.
We actually have slightly less in revenue for the property taxes for 2023, and that is based on the net assessed valuation. There was a change in certain categories on their assessment rates, and that did bring down our valuation.
Okay, so even though our mill rate is going up ever so slightly, the revenue from this is actually going down a bit.
Correct. And our main mill levy, our general mill levy, is the same as it was last year, or for our 2022 budget. What changed was the abatement mill levy, and that one we essentially, the county provides on our notice of valuation. On there, I think it was $1,140 that we could collect. So we back into that to get as close as we can to that dollar amount.
Thank
So
you.
that's the only
helpful.
change.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, we'd like to entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor, if I might.
Oh, your hand is raised.
Yes. I've got a bad background there. I don't think you can see it. No, I think Tammy Nordyke answered this. I just wanted to ask it a little different way. If we wanted the revenues to just stay the same dollar amount from year to year, that would move the mill levy around a little bit, but I'm not sure. I guess I'm not 100% clear whether we can even do that. In other words, if we didn't want a slightly less or slightly lower revenue, could we have done something about that?
Any increase in our general operating mill levy would have to be taken to the vote of the community. We cannot change that mill levy on a whim.
So that the actual mill levy amount has to stay there regardless of the revenue that it produces.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Tracy, for asking it in that way. That was really helpful to me as well.
All right, is there a motion? Councilmember Smith.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve Resolution 17, Series of 2022.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a vote.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Aye.
B. Smith.
Aye.
Stein.
Aye.
Tracy.
Aye.
Worthington.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And now on item F, this is a second reading and adoption for Ordinance 20 of 2022, and this is concerning appropriating sums of money to various funds and spending agencies for the 2023 budget year. So back to you again, Finance Director Tammy Nordyke.
So Ordinance 20, Series of 2022 appropriates the 2023 budget, and it will be appropriated based on the amendment that was done by Resolution 16, Series of 2022. We have not received any additional public comment on this ordinance, and the only change that was made in the ordinance was to get it in, to reflect the changes that were made in Resolution 16, Series of 2022.
Any questions? Councilmember Smith.
I don't have a question. I was
Oh,
just going to
yeah.
make a motion.
Let's do it.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve Ordinance 20, Series of 2022 on second reading.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a vote.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Aye.
B. Smith.
Aye.
Stein.
Aye.
Tracy.
Aye.
Worthington.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Okay. We are actually going to move to our newly formed item F2, and that was from C, the bid award for 4722-2022 for Reynolds Avenue Water Main Replacement Project.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We asked for this one to be moved because we needed the budget to be fully appropriated before we could approve the expense. This is for the water main replacement on Reynolds Avenue. The amount is $1,478,550.70 to be awarded to K.R. Swordfinger. And that is the lowest cumulative bid for this, for the awarded schedules. And we have Travis Payne, our water superintendent. I don't know if you have any additional comments, but this is a pretty standard award, and this is going to be coming in before we do the 2A project on Reynolds Avenue. So it's a big project, and it's an important one for us.
Yeah, so I did compare it to Orchard Avenue. It's kind of our last benchmark for a project of this size. It's roughly about 169% cost increase. A lot of that can be explained away. It's 20% longer in just feet of pipe being laid, as well as Orchard was 8-inch pipe. This is going to be 12-inch pipe. So that's about 111% cost increase just for pipe material. So there's a remaining 38% that I believe can be kind of spoken for. There's more pits per feet. It's more condensed housing over there. So on Orchard, there was 1 pit for every 86 feet, and for Reynolds, there's 1 pit for every 58 feet. So there's just a whole lot more meter pits that need to be installed. Additionally, the city installed the casing under the ditch crossing for Orchard. Well, we're not able to do that. It's a lot larger of a casing for Reynolds, so we're not able to do that. So the contractor's performing that work. And then the last thing is it's going to include a ditch crossing on College Avenue. So we have 20-inch water main on either side of a ditch crossing on College. On under the ditch itself is 4-inch, so when you have that kind of bottleneck, it really renders that 20-inch useless. So we'll be able to kind of complete a 20-inch loop down College with this as well.
Nice. Thanks for running those numbers. That was really helpful.
What's the scheduled time for that 2A?
I'm not sure about 2A, because this is the water main only.
Oh, okay. Well, for the water main
Yeah,
itself?
for the water main, I believe it was February.
Okay.
If not March.
I only ask because I've had some Reynolds residents asking me when
They're
it's
going to have a
fair
long
enough.
year.
Yeah. Oh, I take that. I'm
They're
sorry.
dreading it.
I misspoke.
It's going to be beautiful when it's done.
Yeah.
Third week in January for the ditch crossings.
Okay.
Both College and Reynolds. But
Yeah,
then
they
they'll-
they
Thank
need
you.
to get started sooner than later because they need to do the ditch crossing while the ditch is off.
Right.
Right.
It's exciting this big project is getting done this year.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to ask about the impact of not moving forward with Schedules B and C, Pair and Field, and kind of how you saw that intersecting with 2A.
Sure. So on Pear, that's 12-inch transite main. So in kind of conversations with other employees, we've kind of determined that that's going to be an acceptable risk to put new street over that. 12-inch transite tends to have a lot thicker diameter to the pipe. So what we'll do is we'll go back in and we'll replace all the service saddles. So that's where the service lines connect into the water main. That's where we tend to see a lot of leaks on transite, is the saddles erode away, and that creates the leak. So we will dig down on all the services and run new services on that main, but we feel that it'd be appropriate to go ahead and put new street then on that existing main. On Fields, that will be staff replaced, so we'll do that block in-house. There's only one service on that block, so we feel like we could probably get that done in a decent amount of time.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Is there a motion? Councilmember Smith.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve Resolution 15, Series of 2022.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Call vote.
Councilmember Schmischer?
Aye.
B. Smith?
Aye.
Stein?
Aye.
Tracy?
I just have a clarifying question. This is the bid, right? We're approving the bid?
Yes.
Correct.
The
That's
awarding
correct.
of the bid?
Uh-huh.
Thanks. I vote aye.
Worthington?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and best of luck in executing this construction or the management of it, and we're really, truly excited. Okay, item G. This is a second reading and adoption by title only of Ordinance 22, Series 2022, and this is concerning the increased base rate for stormwater utility enterprise.
First reading of ordinance 22, series of 22, was held on November 7th. No additional public comment has been received on that. We did make a change in the ordinance, and that was to add the third whereas, and it now includes the reason for and the percentage of the increase. We felt by putting that in our ordinances that when we are trying to research what percentage increases have happened in prior years, it will make it easier to identify.
Got it. Okay. Councilmember Smith?
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve Ordinance 22, Series of 2022 on second reading.
Second.
You guys can all jump in now.
Any discussion or further questions? Call vote.
Councilmember Schmischer?
Aye.
B. Smith?
Aye.
Stein?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Worthington?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you. Item H is the second reading and adoption by title only of Ordinance 23, Series of 2022, concerning certain sales tax exemptions.
Again, this is a second reading. We have not received any additional comment, and staff would recommend passing on second reading.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve on second reading ordinance number 23, series of 2022.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call the vote.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
B. Smith?
Aye.
Stein?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Worthington?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you. Item I is a second reading and adoption by title only of Ordinance 24, Series of 2022, and this is concerning certain water rate schedules for the Water Activity Enterprise.
Again, this is a second reading. Just like the stormwater ordinance, we did add an additional whereas identifying the percentage and the reason for the change. Staff would recommend passing on second reading. I don't know that we've received any additional public comment. No? And that's, happy to answer any questions.
Sure. Councilmember Schmisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I commented last time, this rate increase as proposed continues the practice of having Canyon City residents and businesses subsidize the city's water costs as well as the golf course's water costs. I'm not commenting on whether or not those costs should be subsidized, but I am saying that I don't think that it's appropriate for all of Canyon City's residents and other businesses to subsidize those costs.
Any other comments from council? Is there a motion? Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Madam Mayor and Council, I recommend, I move that we approve Ordinance 24, Series of 22 on second reading.
I'll second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Sure.
Just one more thing to say. I'm also not commenting, I'm in no way trying to say that there are not inflationary costs, and I am recognizing the fact that the water department does, in fact, need additional funds to ensure that our enterprise fund is solvable. I just don't think that the rate increases across the board are appropriate.
And we'll probably add that we are due for another study. And let's get moving on that exploration for that bid.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Let's call a vote.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Nay.
B. Smith?
Nay.
Stein?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Worthington?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
The motion carries. I'm going to open a public hearing. This is for item J. This is the introduction and first reading by title only of Ordinance 21, Series of 2022, entitled An Ordinance of the City of Canyon City amending certain section of Title 17 of the Canyon City Municipal Code concerning permitted uses, parking, and definitions, and adding an administrative interpretation process.
And I will turn this over to Patrick Mulready, our city planner.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. This evening, we are conducting a public hearing on a draft ordinance which, as written, would make 10 changes to the city's Unified Development Code, or UDC. Council members may recall that at the time the city's UDC was adopted in the fall of 2021, it was explained that once the code became effective, it may be clear that despite the best efforts of everyone reviewing the new code, some items might have simply been omitted or found not to be working as well as intended. So ordinances updating the code post-adoption was fully understood to be likely. This is the third of what staff has come to call an omnibus fix to the Unified Development Code, and it proposes 10 modifications. The first of the 10 changes involves replacement language in section 17.05.040A6. The new language clarifies that where any identified use, and the use table shown in Chapter 1703 of the UDC lists a specific performance standard to be found in Chapter 1705, that standard applies whether the use is permitted, conditional, or special review. This language replaces language permitting pertaining to uses not listed in Chapter 1705. This is because uses not listed is being addressed in a later section of the draft ordinance with the creation of an administrative determination. There will be more on this subject introduced later in this presentation. Proposed changes 2, 3, and 4 are related in that they involve certain uses within the CB Central Business District downtown. Currently, medical and dental clinic and professional office are not permitted at all in the CB Central Business District. This is a problem because the city already has many of these uses along Main Street, making them legal nonconforming in nature. The proposed change would allow these uses as conditional uses in the CB zone, thus creating a pathway to allow new uses to be established and for the potential expansion of existing uses. The draft ordinance then establishes a use-specific standard for both use types. 1705-080B would pertain to medical and dental clinics, and 1705-090C would pertain to professional office. In both cases, the specific performance standard would make these uses principally permitted in the CB district if located above the ground floor. The reason for these changes, oops, I advanced too fast. The reason for these proposed changes has to do with the intent of the CB Central Business District, which, as stated in Section 1702-030A2C, reads, CB Central Business, the CB District, is intended to foster the continued economic vitality of Canyon City's historic downtown and to provide and preserve a central setting for pedestrian-oriented mixed-use development as well as cultural amenities. Pedestrian-oriented in this context refers to the window shopping appeal of ground floor uses and as such encourages restaurants, retail, and similar uses which activate the pedestrian realm with liveliness. Typical office uses, whether they are medical or dental clinics, or office uses such as insurance offices, accountants, lawyers' offices, banks, etc., while they may be commercial in nature, don't necessarily introduce that liveliness activation on the ground floor which the CB zone anticipates. Above ground floor does not create a conflict, so above ground floor locations are permitted. By treating these uses as conditional use permits on the ground floor, there is at least an administrative pathway for medical, dental, and office uses to become established in the Central Business District and help fill vacancies along Main Street. Proposed modification number 5 is a clarification regarding parking requirements in the CB Central Business District. Currently, the language in paragraph 1706-010B1 exempts non-residential uses in the CB Central Business District zone. The ordinance proposes to add a section 1706-010B2 which clarifies that the parking exemption within CB Central Business District includes designated historic structures unless the structure is expanded in some way. The reason this modification is necessary is that it has been staff's observation that there is an interest in the development community to update and modify buildings on Main Street, some of which are listed as historic structures. From the existing language, it was unclear what interior modifications meant in the context of parking requirements along Main Street, and this modification clarifies that parking requirements are only triggered when there is an expansion to the floor area of a building, even an historic structure. Interior modifications do not trigger that requirement. The sixth proposed change to the UDC also pertains to parking requirements downtown on Main Street. When the current UDC was adopted in 2021, the exemption from the parking requirements for non-residential uses within the CB Central Business District was continued. But that exemption, largely due to feedback from business owners on Main Street, was not extended to new residential uses on Main Street. All new above-ground residential development in the CB Central Business District was going to have to meet a code-defined requirement of 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit. As stated in the previous proposed change, staff has noticed an increased interest in developing new residential uses in certain underutilized buildings along Main Street, but the parking requirement that comes with such new development is proving to be a complication to the development community. In that, Although there are off-street parking areas to be found in and around Main Street downtown, these are largely privately owned, and the owners of these lots are unwilling to lease spaces to these developers to meet a parking requirement. What this proposed modification does is create a pathway to get around the parking requirement by giving the developer proposing to create new residences along Main Street an option to satisfy the off-street parking requirement by paying an in-lieu fee per parking space. This would allow the developer to move forward with creating the new residential units and provide the city with resources to acquire land that could then be converted into off-street public parking facilities. The amount of the parking in lieu fee will be established by council with the adoption of a resolution setting the fee, and staff intends to present that resolution at the time of second reading of this ordinance, should it pass on first reading this evening. As mentioned previously, the first proposed change eliminated the existing language in section 1705-040A6 pertaining to uses not listed. The seventh proposed change replaces the language with a new section 1710-010J, Administrative Determinations. Chapter 1710 regulates zoning standards and procedures, and this new language creates a process for evaluating a proposed use within a zone district which might not be listed in the use tables in Chapter 1703. This process will evaluate the proposed use against similar types of uses in the particular zone district, the effect that setting a precedent might have on the surrounding neighborhood, and have these determinations made on a case-by-case basis. This new 1710-010J also creates an appeals process should an applicant disagree with the findings of the zoning administrator, so that the matter could be heard by Planning Commission and City Council. The eighth proposed change works in combination with administrative determinations in 1710-010J. This proposed change amends the definitions section of the UDC, Chapter 1713. This proposed change creates a new paragraph 1713-010E, which indicates that any term not specifically defined in Chapter 1713 will be understood to be the common dictionary definition of the term. The reason for this proposed change is that it works in combination with the new administrative determination section to ensure that any proposed use which might not be enumerated in the use tables in Chapter 1713 or 1703, nor defined in Chapter 1713, will be understood to default back to a commonly understood reference. The ninth proposed change amends the definition section of the UDC, section 1713-170, to create a definition for the term professional office. Now, professional office is a term that was not defined in the previous Title 17, nor is it defined in the current UDC. While the meaning of this term may seem obvious and commonly understood among anyone who's ever worked in a traditional office, the concept of a workspace has evolved over the years to include professions beyond the common meaning of the term. This includes such uses as studio space for professional artists, sculptors, and musicians. It can also include membership-driven organizations, associations for various professions, civic or fraternal organizations, trade or business associations, and labor unions. By adding this additional scope to the definition of professional office, the goal is to create a broader frame of reference to the term that will proactively allow for more unusual workplace situations to fall within this land use type, and thus avoid confusion in the future. Finally, the 10th proposed change that would also amend Chapter 1713 with the addition of a new section 1713-240. Waste transfer facility is defined as a facility used to temporarily store waste before it is transported to a recycling, treatment, or permanent waste disposal facility. This change is being made because neither the previous Title 17 nor the current UDC ever created such a definition. This recently became a topic of conversation after a zoning entitlement research firm contacted staff investigating the local waste transfer facility to determine if an existing use in an I industrial zone parcel is indeed a defined use within the UDC. This corrects that. Now, per the notice requirements to the text amendments to Title 17, as specified in Table 1710-030, C3D, this hearing has been advertised with a published notice on the city's website for at least 15 days prior to the Planning Commission and City Council public hearing. Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this request on October 26, 2022, and forwarded a unanimous recommendation for approval. Therefore, staff and the Planning Commission recommend City Council approve the draft ordinance making 10 amendments to the UDC on first reading and set the second reading for December 19th, 2022. As always, that would conclude the staff presentation. I am certainly eager to answer any questions that council may have. Thank you.
All right, council. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did read all of the information we were provided, and my only questions are the concerning parking and parking in lieu fees. And as I read through that, one of the questions that I asked myself, because what we're talking about is setting the fee to be charged for each parking space, that council would consider all costs associated with the provision of the necessary parking, including planning, design, land acquisition or lease cost, and construction of improvements. And I thought that the reason that that some of these developments may not be able to get parking spaces is because of cost. I mean, the cost, if they really convince someone to sell, the cost might be truly prohibitive. And so I was thinking that wouldn't it be better to extend this rather than a one-time fee over some period of time? But then I also had the thought that if we did that, it is no longer a fee but a tax. And so that kind of put the kibosh on that idea, trying to think of a way to perhaps make it a little bit less impactful on someone who was doing a long-term project. But do you have any idea of what, if they were available, what parking spaces would sell for in our commercial business district?
Within Central Business District, I don't know what negotiations have happened between the owners of private lots and potential residential developers. I can tell you that I have done some surveys of other construction projects that are happening around town outside of the downtown area, such as Fire Station Number 3, the new Pharisee Ford. I am reaching out to the school district concerning the middle school, or the improvements that were made at the middle school, and I've also just recently gotten a contact for the general contractor who's going to be building the new Love's RV park and travel stop, in an effort to get sort of ballpark ranges for what the construction of parking spaces costs in these areas. Within that range, staff's motive is to try and incentivize the in lieu fee payment by making it half or slightly less than half of what the ballpark range comes to for construction of a parking space. And the idea is, okay, yeah, you're still having a financial obligation, but if you write the city a check, you've fulfilled that obligation, and then the city begins looking to manage its parking resources more effectively.
The one caveat that I would add to that is, in addition to the construction costs, factoring in some type of acquisition cost as well.
Right. Yes, and that was, that's kind of what my discussion is about, because the acquisition cost for land, if it's not for sale, can be really quite steep, and so that becomes kind of a unknown and hard to determine exactly what a fair and reasonable amount for that should be. And based on the discussion, although I like incentivizing the ability to construct projects in our the central business district. I'm not sure that I would recommend setting it at half, but that can be a discussion for when it does come in, because to me, this is something, if it's not available, it's kind of a deal breaker. But if it's available at a regular commercial cost, then that just should go into the calculations of the project.
Right, and the goal is to set up that in lieu fund for, parking acquisition and build outs when we have enough funds. And, this has been something that's been an issue since I got here, and probably be a long-term issue. This is one tool that we can put in the toolbox to try and help solve this issue. We'll bring forward some numbers when we bring forward the resolution to set the impact fee, and we can have some more discussion at that point.
Corey, I saw your hand up.
I think Ryan hit most of the things I was going to cover. The one thing council should be aware of is this is effectively a type of an impact fee. So the payment in lieu of parking effectively buys someone the right to park somewhere. And so by having the dedicated and segregated parking impact fee fund, it allows the city to maximize those dollars in terms of acquisition and ultimately construction. But that's what you are effectively buying, is instead of having that parking space on site, the ability a right to park ultimately in one of the city facilities.
But that would be where it's legal to park, like it's still only 3-hour parking on Main Street, is that right? Like they're not buying to be able to park overnight or for, 8 hours on Main Street. They
Correct,
have to still
but-
find a place.
Correct, and ultimately the idea is to take all of the dollars that are deposited in the parking impact fee fund and be able to construct city parking.
And to use a sports analogy, it's kind of like the player to be named later.
Yeah.
I know, but I mean, that means we also have to be working diligently to provide that parking.
And just another general comment on parking. I've been on this earth for 75 years, good grief, and there's never a good time to buy parking or, places to park buses or anything like that. You're always behind the curve on it, and this is a way to try and ameliorate that somewhat. Thank you.
Next in the queue is Councilmember Schmischer and then Worthington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had 2 quick questions or additional comments on parking, and then I had a few questions on others as well.
Well, we also have Councilmember Tracy with her hand up, so let's start with parking.
Okay.
And then we'll circle around back.
Okay, that sounds great. So on parking, my 2 questions were, should we perhaps add in J, parking in lieu fees, J2, should we add maintenance to that list? I mean, maintenance for parking lots is somewhat low, but I would want to make sure that that city fund could be used for the ongoing costs related to it.
You certainly could.
Okay. And then on number 8, I just wanted to, I think you just answered this question, Corey, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So if they essentially paid that parking in lieu of fee, would they have a little placard by a couple of spots in that city lot that say parking reserved for? Because in 8, it says, all fees shall be collected, and shall be used only for the purposes set forth in this section and for the benefit of the contributing project. So I just want to make sure that we're not in some way hamstringing ourselves into having a city parking lot full of reserved spots for certain businesses.
And the answer to your question is absolutely not. It is a right to park in a city lot, effectively.
Okay,
That exists now or may in the future exist.
thank you.
Councilmember Worthington and then Tracy.
I guess I'm having a little trouble putting all this together in the sense that I'm thinking about from the developer's side, they pay the fee for in lieu of, and so you get somebody to rent or buy whatever they've set up on the second floor of one of these great buildings, but they may end up parking at least temporarily 3 to 4 blocks away. And if you're a single woman or something that way, walking at night to get back to your abode, could be kind of a impact as far as sell by the developer or the salesperson. So I guess I'm a little concerned about how long is it going to take to be able for somebody to buy something and know that they're going to have maybe a parking space that's a little bit closer. Does that make sense?
So this is where the player to be named later analogy comes into play. Right now, what we're hearing from the development community is that the target market they're going after for individuals or couples who want to move to dwelling units that are right on Main Street, they are typically a very young demographic. To the extent that they've got a car, they don't use it very often, they tend to bike a lot more. And so what we're getting is pushback from developers about why they should even have to meet a parking requirement at all. So what we're saying is, well, the way the UDC was drafted, we want new residential uses as a result of feedback we got from merchants downtown to have to actually figure out what they're going to do for parking. But we are, with this change to the UDC, willing to give you kind of a financial off-ramp to that obligation, where it then becomes an obligation the city takes on.
And just because they have some people that are interested in doing a lot of biking doesn't mean they're not going to have a resident that has 3 cars, which can, which that wouldn't be a very good fit for them.
Well, if you have 3 cars and no garage, you may, that may be a choice you want to evaluate.
I know, but it happens. Are we ready to move on to Councilmember Tracy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is not about parking, so I don't know if there's anyone else that wants to address that first.
Oh, I did have one. The lot that we purchased behind the dry cleaners, is that open for the public to park in now?
It is.
It is, okay. If this passes, I think we need to, I mean, I already want the heat on to get that dry cleaning agreement taken care of, but we need it, obviously, desperately.
We have a meeting later this week with the environmental attorney to talk about the New Method property itself, so.
We also might want to talk about parking at behind the Chamber of Commerce. I know this comes up a lot, but we have businesses that are parking there overnight, and if we have residents that need a place to stay that's safe to get to their resident, we might need to have some more discussions about a better way to manage that parking in that lot. I know I've said that a lot, but we really do need to do it.
And we've had those discussions before. We can have them again with the residents and the businesses down there. It's been a couple of years, but we had proposed doing permits for the old chamber parking lot, and we were met with quite a bit of resistance on that. So we can certainly bring it up again and have those discussions again and see if the sentiment has changed.
Well, the dynamics are changing now, and so it might be time to have that. And maybe we'll just see where it lands. So if we're moving, is anything else on parking? Okay, then we'll move this back to Councilmember Schmisher with her additional questions, and then Councilmember Tracy.
And Councilwoman Tracy, if you have any questions about any of the topics that I raised, please stop me before I move on to the next one. So my first question was about Section 5 with regard to the designated historic structures. I just wanted clarity. Is that designated by our Historic Preservation Commission? Is that any historic designation?
It is one that has an historic designation locally.
Okay, and should we maybe add that into the wording? Because right now it just says a designated historic structure.
We certainly can.
Okay, I would maybe recommend making that change.
Sure.
To make it clear. And then I'm wondering if that has been discussed with the Historic Preservation Commission, and if we have a sense of how many of the buildings downtown have been so designated and how many more are likely to be so designated.
So I don't know that we had a conversation with the Historic Preservation Commission before this, only because the intent of this provision is to say, the only reason you're going to have to meet a parking requirement if you're in a designated historical building is if you're putting a building addition on. Anything you do internally, such as what the St. Cloud is doing, or what Fremont Provisions did in their building. If it's internal, contained within the existing building, there is no parking requirement that comes along with it, and all we're trying to do is clarify that's what this is supposed to mean in the code. So to the extent that someone's wanting to do an addition to an historic, a designated historic structure, certainly we will get the Historic Preservation Commission involved, because at that point, they're going to want to know that there's going to be an addition happening.
Sure.
At least in terms of what's going on internally within a building for renovations. Having spoken with Lisa about this topic exclusively, it sounds to me like they're less interested in the interior of a building than they are in the exterior.
And Patrick, that addition would only be for residential, correct? Because commercial, there is no parking requirement on.
Well, true, but again, the addition, the assumptive logic is for an historic building, if you're making a building addition, even if that's not residential, there would be a parking requirement triggered on the increase in square footage.
Okay. Yeah, if we could add in just kind of what which historic designation sorry. Which historic designating body we mean.
Certainly.
In that, I think that would be really helpful. And then I just wanted a little bit more clarity on the professional office, like the expansion in that definition and what the intent is behind that, if there, like what particular need we see that, what particular need there is to expand that to include kind of the artists and, professional members and things like that.
Well, this was a recommendation that came through our city attorney's office over the fact that when we redid our code, we did away with a lot of archaic uses. You no longer in a zoning code, for example, see music shops because we don't have, Tower Records or anything like that anymore. They don't exist. So this provision, broadening the scope of what constitutes a professional office, is in a way trying to get in front of that curve so that as this use evolves over time, what is a workplace, we have the tool to say, all right, that's now encompassed within the scope of this.
And I would just add, the goal is, even though there's a section in here about administrative interpretations, the goal is still to avoid them. And so this reinforces that goal by making the definition more applicable to today's professional office workplace environment.
Does including those entities in this definition limit the number of zones that they would be eligible to be in, or does it expand it?
Well, I would say, right now, we have a use category called professional office, and if you look at one of our non-residential tables in 1713, it will tell you where it's permitted. All this is doing is saying, all right, these uses now fall within that category of professional office, therefore it broadens their scope all over the city where they're permitted.
But it does not, to answer your question, it does not change the zoning at all. It just defines the term.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Councilmember Tracy.
Thanks. I may have missed this, but Patrick, if you could just clarify a little for me, for medical, dental offices, professional offices on the main floor on Main Street, I understand it's not, it's that we've got some grandfathered in situations, so I'll set that aside. But if something new comes to the city, what would that approval process look like?
Well, if we don't adopt this, if we don't make these changes, there would be no approval process because it wouldn't be allowed. If we do make this change, it will be what we call a conditional use permit, which is an administrative process where an application comes in, we not only send it out for referral, but there is a mailing sent to all property owners within 300 feet of the property that's undergoing the request. There is a 15-day window of opportunity for those affected property owners to notify the city of concerns they have about this particular application. And at that point, at the end of the referral period and at the end of the mailing period, we can make an evaluation about what conditions may need to be imposed upon the request so that it can function compatibly with surrounding land uses. But there would be no hearings before Planning Commission or council involved with that request.
Great. That's really helpful just to hear how that would work. And I have to say, this is the first time I've seen a speaker in council chambers. So I don't know what happened. I just saw Patrick, but haven't seen anyone up to now. Just FYI.
I appear to have a functioning camera pointed at me.
Okay, well, congratulations. Thanks.
Thank you, I think.
Patrick does well with the camera. So I do have a question, because there has been some confusion. We have had a business come to downtown that was medical in nature, and they thought that they could move in because there's lots of other medical offices on Main Street, and didn't realize that there's a change in the zoning. So of use. So what happens to that
Well,
business now?
as I understand it, that particular business has moved a few blocks east on Main Street, so they're now in the GC General Commercial District.
Oh, so they've already,
So they have relocated.
okay.
If they had not relocated, and you remember there was some confusion about whether they were operating on the first floor or the second floor, because I guess there's a stairwell in the building, but there isn't really office
It goes to
space
nowhere.
on a second floor. It
Yeah.
doesn't go anywhere. So, yeah, if they were to remain there, we would probably ask them to go through a conditional use permit approval process to remain there.
Well, I appreciate you. I think making this compromise on this, I think it's really appropriate.
Well, and I think staff took on board the fact that we did get feedback. There are a lot of vacancies on Main Street, and building owners would very much like to see those filled, so we wanted to give a pathway for approval in those
Filled with
circumstances.
something is better than nothing until we get to that point where we can be a little bit more picky and choosy. I think this is a good middle ground. Anything else from council? Well, I need to ask, it is required, is there anybody in the public that would like to make a comment? We still have a really patient minor sitting in the back. He's been so awesome. Little Phil has been well behaved. Other than that, I see no public comment. So I will close this public hearing. And would like to ask if someone would like to make a motion. It would, Amy Schmisher, are you going to include an amendment for the Historic Commission? Okay, yeah.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 21, series of 2022, on first reading with 2 amendments. One in section 5.2, stating Fremont County Historic Preservation Commission designated historic structures.
I think just locally designated.
Locally
Yeah,
designated?
locally
Okay.
designated.
Locally, in case they change their name, or in case I got it wrong.
There's 2, there's Fremont County, but we also have our certified local government as well, so there's actually 2 agencies that could potentially do it.
Section 5.2, locally designated historic structures. And in section 6J2, at the end of the list of the things that the fees could be used for, and development and redevelopment, comma, and maintenance of public parking facilities.
If I could ask for an amendment to that motion, that same change also needs to be made in number 6, that addition.
I will accept your friendly amendment to said motion. In number 6, under J, parking in lieu of fees, adding and maintenance to the end of that long list as well. J6. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call vote.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
B. Smith,
Aye.
Stein,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Worthington,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Thank you all, appreciate it. Now we are on to item K, introduction and first reading by title only of ordinance 25, series of 2022. This is an ordinance of the City of Canyon City amending section 5.30.010 and chapter 5.30 of the Canyon City Municipal Code concerning liquor licensing and festival permits.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This went to the general government meeting on November 9th. This creates a local permit for festivals as allowed per section 442404 of the state liquor law, and allows us to create a local permit to be consistent with other liquor licensing. Cindy, do you have anything you'd like to add regarding this permit?
No, no changes from when we brought it. It just makes everything consistent with how we have everything else.
And I do have one thing, because I know this came up previously, and so I wanted to expand a little bit, because there had been discussion about why the term was not defined. And I know that was there was some fairly robust discussion. And I just want to add that liquor licensing is a matter of statewide concern, which means the city can't deviate from it. And since the state hasn't defined it, that's why it's not defined here, because if we define it, we run the risk, frankly, of defining it in a way the state had not intended. So, but for this being a matter of statewide concern, we would absolutely look at recommending some form of a definition, but in this context, we can't.
Thank you for that clarification. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Just a comment under the proposed language under Section 115 Festival Permits A. It says, a licensee wishing to host a festival must first obtain a permit. And I went into an endless do loop there, and I said, do I wish first or do I get the permit first? And so I would recommend that we delete first before obtain in that sentence. They must obtain a permit.
So tell me again your amendment.
So delete first. And delete first because do you wish first or do you obtain the permit first? So this says a licensee wishing to host a festival must first. So if you don't get the permit first, you can't wish. See my do loop there? Yes, right.
I don't know if we
So
really need first anyways.
you have to get a permit, and you don't have to say when. You say you have to get a permit, and it's understood that it's before you can do the
Does
festival.
it mean like, is it the intent that it needs to be the state permit first and then the local permit?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Is it first from the state?
And then otherwise you
Must
can't go to the
first
local
obtain
first.
a permit from the
Backwards.
state,
Yeah.
and then it should say, and then the local authority.
You turn it into the state?
So I'm going to actually add an additional layer, because I think it actually, you find it in A and not in subsection B. And the reason for that is you have to first obtain the blanket permit, and then once you obtain that, you have the authorization to have more festivals in subsection B. So A is actually, you can ultimately have 9 permits,
Right.
but I think A is, before you ever get to the multiple ones, you got to get the first one from the state and the local licensing. Again, I think it reads better with first because it's in subsection A but not in subsection B. But if you deleted first, the ordinance still works.
Understanding what you said there, I'm actually good with first remaining. I understand now more
Okay.
fully. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Wishful thinking.
Wish you that too.
Any other inputs or questions? I'd like to entertain a motion. Councilmember Smith.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve ordinance 25, series of 2022 on first reading.
Second.
It's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a vote.
Councilmember Schmischer,
Aye.
B. Smith,
Aye.
Stein,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Worthington,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Thank you. Item L, introduction and first reading by title only of Ordinance 26, Series of 2022, entitled, An Ordinance of the City of Canyon City approving an addendum to the master lease agreement with U.S. Bancorp Government Leasing and Financing, Inc.
Turn it over to Tammy.
This is the first reading of ordinance 26 series of 2022 approving the addendum to the master lease agreement with U.S. Bancorp Government Leasing and Financing, Inc. and it should be for ordinance 26, it should be for our streets vehicle, so I have an error in my memo, sorry about that. The 2023 adopted budget includes the purchase of the tandem dump truck and backhoe for streets utilizing the lease purchase agreement. Finance did receive 5 quotes for financing. U.S. Bank was the most competitive with the rate of 5.01%. The annual payments total $114,119.40, and that is for a 3-year lease period, and the payments will be made quarterly. That is the end of the staff report, and we recommend that it is adopted on first reading.
Thank you. Corey?
Just one quick addition, because I know this question has come up frequently when you've considered these, and that is there is a state statute that requires these to be approved by ordinance.
Okay.
And so that is why you have the ordinance in front of you on both of these.
As well as a waiting period?
Yes.
Is that because we're going into like a financing agreement or a debt?
Well, the statute says that you have to do it by ordinance, and that because it is this type of ordinance, it is not subject to doing it via an emergency. So it's sort of a two-pronged analysis. Yes, you have to do it by ordinance, and no, it can't be done by emergency, which means you got to go through the waiting period.
Okay. Councilmember Schmischer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Do we have a sense of when the city will receive this tandem dump truck and backhoe?
The tandem dump truck was actually ordered, is that one of the ones that was ordered at the end of, or in 20?
It was at the end of 21, I believe.
And went into 22. We were anticipating arriving in October, November of this year. That's when it actually went into production. And so they are anticipating that we will have it within, I thought it was by the end of first quarter, beginning of second, so first, second quarter time frame.
So will we begin payments on it before we actually?
No, shouldn't.
Yes,
Oh.
that is what will happen. The funds will go into escrow, and as the funds are in escrow, we will earn a little bit of interest on that. If we do not enter into the agreement now, we run the risk of, if the vehicle comes in January, we will not have funding available because, as City Attorney Hoffman mentioned, there is a waiting period. We have a 30-day waiting period after publication of the ordinance before the financing is truly in effect.
But it's going into escrow though, so.
Yes.
It'll be there ready and waiting.
It
for
will be
when
there
we
ready
can
and
receive
waiting.
those vehicles.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Actually, my question's been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Worthington?
This may be silly, but what year is the dump truck going to be titled under? Because technically, you're not going to be getting it till 23. Is it going to be licensed and VIN numbered as 23? Because I would think the eventual worth of it down the road, you don't want to buy a new equipment that is 2 years old. You see what I'm saying? somebody who's into old cars and stuff, this is a question because I think the value of that dump truck should be based on when you actually get it, not titled back 2 years.
And as far as I know, it will either, I'm not sure if it's going to be titled as a 2022 or a 2023.
Okay.
The VIN number, I think Jim Johnson did receive what the VIN number was going to be, but I do not recall what he said the year of the vehicle of the dump truck will
And
be.
this is probably going to be a 20-year piece of equipment anyway, so it may be a moot point, but it was just something that if you're going to be getting a new piece of equipment, you want it to be licensed as a new piece of equipment with the most current date, so.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Tammy, is this also the dump truck that we're putting money down?
Yes, yes. The actual price of the equipment is an additional, this includes 2 pieces of equipment. One of them is the tandem dump truck and one is the backhoe. We are putting $100,000 down on the tandem, which we had budgeted this year. So we wanted to go ahead. We had $100,000 budgeted for a lease payment. We wanted to go ahead and put that down, so then our payments were essentially, we were financing less.
Okay. Is there a motion? Councilmember Smith.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve ordinance 26, series of 2022 on first reading.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a vote.
Councilmember Schmisher,
Aye.
B. Smith,
Aye.
Stein,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Worthington,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Thank you all. Our last item on this agenda. Item M, introduction and first reading by title only of ordinance 27, series of 2022, entitled, An Ordinance of the City of Canyon City approving an addendum to the master lease agreement with U.S. Bancorp Government Leasing and Financing, Inc.
We'll turn it over to Tammy to bring us home.
Okay. So this is the first reading of ordinance 27, series of 2022, approving the addendum to the master lease agreement with U.S. Bancorp Government Leasing and Financing, Inc. for police vehicles. The adopted 2023 budget includes the purchase of 7 vehicles for the police department utilizing a lease purchase agreement. A portion of those vehicles are patrol vehicles and the other are staff vehicles. Again, Finance did receive 5 quotes for the financing. U.S. Bank was the most competitive with a rate of 5.09%. The payment will be $89,971.64 for 5 years, paid quarterly. We do have the VIN numbers on the Tahoes already, and they are ready to be sent to upfitting. So this is actually a plus. So that concludes the staff report, and our recommendation is to adopt on first reading.
Nothing to add? Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve ordinance 27, series of 2022 on first reading.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a vote.
Councilmember Schmisher,
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Stein,
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthington,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
All right, the motion carries. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. Welcome again to the team, Butch. It's really a pleasure to have you here with us tonight. And this meeting is adjourned.